Ecommerce Marketing Podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own referral program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. I am your host, Arlen Robinson, and today we have a very special guest, Mickie Kennedy, who is an expert at helping small businesses, authors, and startups increase their visibility and credibility. 22 years ago, Mickie founded eReleases after realizing that small businesses desperately needed a press release service that they could actually afford, giving them access to the media and to a national newswire, all with a personal touch. eReleases has grown since then, but the spirit of Mickie's original intent has not changed. eReleases delivers personal service and exceptional value to every customer with every press release at every price point. Mickie lives in Baltimore County with his family and 2 feuding cats. He enjoys British science fiction and acknowledges an unhealthy addiction to diet soda. Mickie holds an MFA in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry from George Mason University. He still writes poetry mostly Monday nights virtually with a group of fellow misfits in Brunswick, Maryland. Welcome to the podcast, Mickie.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And I am super excited to talk to you today about press releases, which is your bread and butter, your core focus. So I know you're going to be able to, enlighten us on that subject, specifically for how, e-commerce businesses can take advantage of press releases. But, before we get into all of that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and, specifically how you actually got into what you're doing today?
Okay. So I guess around 25 years ago, I was in graduate school and assumed getting a degree in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry, I'd just be waiting tables the rest of my life. So I spent my first summer after my first year of grad school doing just that and realized this is a lot harder than it looks. My back ached, my ankles and knees ached from being on concrete all day. Right. And I just realized I did not want to do this. In the evening, the last thing I wanted to do was write poetry. I just felt inspired and defeated. Okay. So I went and got an office job and started out as an editor and then transitioned to work for a telecom company. Okay. And one of my jobs at the telecom company was to send out press releases. And we did it through fax. And so we got a brand new fax machine that held 100 phone numbers. So I had to program 100 numbers into it, hit send, about 8 or 10 hours later, hit delete and add 80 more numbers because our contact list was between 180 and 190 sources. And it was a waste of 2 days. But because we were publishing telecom statistics and numbers, we started to get a lot of phone calls from journalists saying, hey, could you just email me this as a Microsoft Word attachment? I can copy and paste the numbers much more easily than retyping them out. And so a light bulb went off and said, email is much superior than faxing. So I mentioned that to my boss and he said, that sounds like a good business. You should go start it. And so I spent about a year fielding journalists and asking if they'd like to be part of my database. 99% of them said, yes, sure. And, it's a lot's changed because I now, if I had the task of contacting 15,000 journalists over a year, I suspect most would say, no, stop the email. But back then it was very unique and people were really looking forward to it. Over the years, we were approached by PR Newswire and said, why don't you send your releases through us? And I always first pointed out, well, you charge $1,000 to move a press release nationally. My people can't afford that. So we went back and forth and they looked at my customer base, which does 2 to 4 releases a year. And they acknowledge their salespeople are never going to contact those people. They're just not doing enough volume to matter. And so I sort of positioned it as we're a co-op of small businesses and there's a win-win situation here. So by default, we send all of our press releases for next business day. The Newswire has 24-hour editorial staff And they revealed to me early on in the conversation, overnight, they do nothing. So I was like, you could be working on these press releases and setting them up for morning distribution. So no additional labor. So we sort of created a win-win situation, and all of our releases go out through a custom national distribution through PR Newswire, and we're charging between $200 and $600, and the Newswire starts at $1,000 for a national release. So it's definitely a win-win as far as giving small businesses the same opportunity that big giant companies have, and Inc. 500 and larger companies normally have always been able to easily afford that Newswire distribution, and now they can reach it through us.
Okay. Wow, that's quite a story. And that's some good stuff there. I appreciate that. And it takes me back when you talk about the fax machines. I'm trying to remember the last time I even faxed something. It's man. I mean, when you think about it, the way technology has moved. I mean, these days, I don't think anybody is thinking about faxing anything out really to notify anybody about anything.
Before the email idea, my big aha moment at the business was like, let's just buy a second fax machine, so I'm not deleting the numbers and then putting new ones in. And my boss was like, they're so expensive. That 100 number fax machine was like, I think at the time, $2,000 or $3,000, and we were a small startup, so they were watching every dollar.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, that would have been definitely saved time if they just had two faxes. But yeah, for $2,000 to $3,000, that's something that I know not a lot of small businesses could afford. Probably back then. But yeah, we've definitely come a long way from the days of faxing out press releases, for sure. Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. Of course, since today we're going to be talking about the press releases, and before I guess we dig deep, why don't you just kind of break it down into what is a press release? How is it really composed? And how do you actually even think about utilizing these type of announcements for marketing purposes?
Right. So a press release is basically an announcement to the media. It can be very short. It could be long, but most of them are around 400 words, might be a little bit more, a little bit less. And basically it's written in third person. If you have something that's in first person, it's usually put in a quote. So it's a company executive or owner of the company for a small business, or an expert or something like that. You want to have an interesting, captivating headline, but you don't want it to be like a pun, like the New York Post style headline, which is for consumers, because on the Newswire, press releases are seen on feeds by their headline. And the journalist wants to make sure when they click on it and look at the whole release that it's contextually important to them and it's in their industry. So when there's a quirky headline that doesn't give a lot of details, they very often don't click through. So that's a thing where a clickbaity headline doesn't work well for media. You want it to have really the facts and all of that meat there. The most important part of the release is the first sentence, because its job is to keep you reading. You want to make sure that whatever your announcement is, that you're getting the information across very succinctly, and just provide more information as you read further. It can include links. You can have a link to a YouTube video or something like that. You can include your logo, an image or photo. That works really well. A lot of publications use that. A lot of publications are taking their articles online, so they love having that additional image that they can put there for their readers or viewers.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I totally understand. How it's like you said, just really an announcement. And when you say an announcement, what are some examples of things that like a typical, because I know some of our listeners are wondering, yeah, it definitely sounds great, I could get national distribution to whatever I'm doing, but if let's just say they're selling a particular product, let's just say they're in the skincare space, they're selling skincare products. What would be an example of something that they could announce? Maybe they may have been selling the same product over and over for a long time, may not be a lot new. How would they effectively craft something that would be interesting enough to put out a press release on?
Right. So sometimes people follow certain movements. A couple of years ago, organic became really important. So if your skincare product is sourced organically or has something like that, that would be something that you could position in an announcement to the media. Let's say your product is using materials from local businesses or sustainable businesses or family farms. That's something that's very positive, environmentally friendly. People are beginning to think more of wanting to do business with smaller companies and smaller relationships. Restaurants often will let you know where all of their produce and meat and stuff like that is sourced from the particular farms and stuff like that, because people want to make a connection. So maybe it's something like that. It could also be how it's being utilized. We had a lot of pivoting type releases over the past year from people who turns out their product could be used because it was antibacterial or had some other kind of uses or benefits that weren't quite obvious. They may have been secondary benefits, but because of everything being on someone's mind, like health and things like that, you can sort of elevate those and downplay some of the other ones. And it could be that you've got a new product line that's usually good. You've reformulated. There's so many different opportunities. I get press releases on all different types of subjects. The one that I get the most that succeeds the least is probably the new hire. Very few people are interested in your new director of HR outside of maybe your trade publication and maybe your local newspaper. And in both of those cases, you'd be better off sending the press release or the announcement yourself directly to them. A lot of people get really afraid of contacting local media. And I always tell people local media is the easiest thing for you as a small business owner to get. And you don't need to pay anybody anything for that. You just reach out, figure out who writes about you in your industry. If it's radio or TV, you're looking for the producer or booker, and you just call and ask if you can have their email address. They'll give it to you. And some people will use a service online. There's some online that'll get you the email address for people if you have their name, and you can certainly use a service like that as well. But just send an introductory email letting them know who you are and what you're up to right now. And then just reach out to them naturally as you have milestones or aha moments where you're like, oh, this could be an interesting take. I always tell people, follow your competitors, especially competitors in different markets, because they might be marketing or getting media attention in their market on a particular subject. And that's an opportunity for you to go to the journalist and say, hey, I've noticed people in my industry are beginning to talk about this subject, and I'd love to talk with you about that at some point here in the near future. And so you've provided them a good tip as to something that's becoming relevant and that their readers might be interested in. So just sort of build these relationships. I tell everybody, you can really saturate your local market with probably under 10 contacts. And that's the only 10 that you need. Just figuring out, if you have a business paper in the area, a minor paper, a major paper, and, maybe radio and TV programs that occasionally spotlight businesses, get those email addresses, and then just, form relationships, reach out to them, and just share, you might encounter someone who is like, don't email me or something like that. But most of them are fine. They recognize they're in a local community, and they appreciate, being provided a good tip. You just want to make sure that, you really are leading with your best foot and not stretching it.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Very interesting. As far as the local spin on it, because what I want to know is like why you mentioned at the beginning that a lot of businesses are afraid to approach local media. Why is that?
I don't know. One of the most often phone calls we get at eReleases is someone saying, I really just want to reach my local newspaper. And I tell every one of them, and my editors will tell you, you don't need us. Just do it. But I think that they feel like because there are companies like mine that specialize in reaching the media, that they have to use it like that. I'm not considered professional if I do it myself. And I'm telling you that, local is all about relationships, and my relationship with your local newspaper is nothing compared to you living within the community and following them. And I always say, if you saw something that was a really good article, share it with them, even if it's not a tip about you. It's just, hey, just following up here. I saw this article, thought it was really solid, loved how you did this. They get so little feedback like that. And so, if you've done the homework and you've actually read, they really appreciate that. And they'll remember it the next time you send something and like, hey, here's something about me. And is it a possible fit? And they're like, well, this person has reached out to me a few times and they read my stuff. And yeah, I'll it might be a little bit of a stretch, but yeah, I'll consider them this time. And that's why you see the same companies again and again in local media. I've talked about it in my entrepreneurs organization that I have locally here. We see the same businesses again and again in the local business papers, and it's because they've got relationships with the journalist and they're reaching out to them, and it's just there for anyone to insert themselves and become part of the building a relationship.
Yeah, that is so true. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's really what it comes down to. It is forming those relationships. At a bare minimum, you reaching out to your local, your local media is really just informing them of who you are and, keeping your business more top of mind whenever they've got something going on, or if you send them something that you think would be interesting. That's what people don't really realize is media in general. They are, they're almost like a hungry a bear after coming out of hibernation. They always need content. They need tons of content because they have deadlines. They've got schedules to meet, and the easier it is for them to do their job if they have all these contacts. They have things that they can put out there. They're going to keep coming to you. So yeah, it's really a good thing. Now, whether you're going to go with the reaching out locally on your own, doing your own local outreach, or a company approaches a business like you, eReleases, and has you manage the national outreach. And then also on the other end of it, let's say somebody tries to do this on their own, tries to do the national outreach on their own. Regardless of which route they go, are there any particular tools that are required for this press release marketing strategy that an e-commerce business would need?
Not really. I mean, there are some to-dos. I still hear from journalists who don't appreciate attachments. That being said, we live in a world of Microsoft Word. So you can copy and paste the Microsoft Word content into an email and send it to a journalist. I don't think it's going to hurt anything to also send it as an attachment. I think there's just some older people that are journalists that are just, no attachments. They're used to being up on dial-up, and we're not in a dial-up environment anymore. So I feel like attachments are fine. You can take the same approach locally and do it nationally. Trade publications are a natural fit because you probably have a finite number of those. Reach out to the journalist within that industry trade publication, and you can sort of build those relationships yourself. When it comes to going mass, though, it's very difficult to do it because you don't have the targeting, you don't have the database of people to send to, and it just makes it very complicated. So I think that I would do the rifle approach rather than the shotgun approach. I would pick just a few highly targeted publications that you feel you have a good chance of getting pickup and approaching them rather than trying to blast it to as many people as possible. That's where a newswire service like PR Newswire really excels because it electronically disseminates to everyone. And some of them will capture it based on, they might look at all news feeds in a certain category like fashion, for example, but some have the fashion feed with Boolean searches attached to it. So like it will exclude anything that might say ready to wear, like maybe they only cover high fashion or something like that. So they can really customize the type of press releases that are being pulled in and looking at that. And that's something you can't easily replicate, doing yourself emailing by emailing a press release. But, but that being said, it is something that I feel like if you don't have a budget for using a service like eReleases, or if you have deeper pockets to go directly to the newswire yourself, you just do it strategically within your industry, and pick a few publications and try to build the relationships, and eventually you will be able to hopefully afford a service, and you'll see the real big difference, because if you have a very newsworthy press release and you send it over the newswire, you could literally get, we had someone just last year got over 100 newspapers picked it up.
Oh, wow.
And these weren't small papers. This was the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post. It was the heavy hitters, and they got international pickup as well. You would never be able to replicate that on your own. That being said, most press releases aren't that newsworthy. So you might only be looking at 4 or 5 newspaper pickups or something like that for something that's really good. But again, you probably didn't know what 4 or 5 newspapers you had a chance at. So you just send it broadly, and then see who picks it up. So that's the real value of it. In some cases, I've seen people get media pickup and it result in like incredible sales. One guy called me and said, I only got picked up in 1 trade publication. And he goes, but we sold a $14 million municipal project to someone in Australia, and we're going to be bundling it up and sending it on a ship down the Mississippi and on its way to Australia somehow. And he was very pleased. He said, I wasn't expecting much. And he goes, to be honest, me and this trade publication hadn't gotten along very well in the past, because we had done some advertising with them. And, I thought that they wouldn't cover me, but they did. And he goes, and it turned out really nice. Sometimes people get media pickup and nothing happens. We had one client who was an author, self-published, and it's very difficult for a self-published fiction writer to get any kind of pickup. And they did. They got in USA Today entertainment section, front cover of the entertainment section of USA Today. He says that he doesn't think he sold any more books than he normally did. And so, that was really disappointing. But I told him, you now have a passport to anywhere you want to go. And he didn't understand, but he had told me that he tried to do local book readings, and none of the bookstores near him would return his phone calls. And I said, you take a scan of that, you email that to the bookstore and say, I'd love for a book signing. And he did. And he said, that worked. He goes, because, I'm a USA Today published author, they paid a lot more attention to me. And, I have a carpet company in New Jersey that came and worked with me. And I told them from the beginning, I don't think this is going to work for you. You're a local carpet company. I just don't see you putting out something that's newsworthy enough. But they said they had a budget for a year. So 5 months in, I was talking to them and I said, this isn't working. We've done 5 releases. Help me here. I said, who's your enemy? Expecting it to be another local carpet company. And it was big box home improvement stores. And he said, they're killing these local carpet companies. He goes, we use a better quality carpet. We use good padding, and they don't. And he says that they just use pickup contractors. They can't tell you who's going to be installing next week, because they don't even know who's installing tomorrow. They just pick up whenever they have inventory. They just go down a list of people and say, are you interested in doing this job, and just showing up. So we did a press release for him on the difficulties of marketing as a local carpet company and what they're doing to combat Home Depot and Lowe's. And they got picked up in every floor trade publication. One of them said that they got more inquiries as a result of that story than all other stories they had done the entire year. And we had discovered that marketing was a vacuum in floor trade publications, and nobody's talking about it. So we just started doing releases talking about marketing, and we got picked up routinely. Almost every single month we got media pickup. And what they did with that is they started going to the showings for a quote, and instead of coming in 2 or 3% less than Home Depot or Lowe's, which was their business model before, trying to be the cheapest, they started coming in 15 to 20% above the big box home improvement stores. But they said, look at this book. And it was like that thick at the time. And it's floor trading today, floor coverings and all these different plugins. We're recognized nationally. And the guy at home, from Home Depot or Lowe's, they don't even know who is going to be installing for you today, and they won't be working for them probably in 6 months. And we use a superior pad. We stand behind it. We're local, and they started converting about 20% higher, 20 to 30% higher conversion rate
Yeah.
at a higher price point. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it worked very well for them. They call it their brag book. They take that
Okay.
brag book around and
Yeah.
give it to their sales guy. And
Mhm.
it's a tool. People go through that and
Mhm.
they're like, wow, I'm impressed. This person has been, picked up in
Mhm.
these national floor publications. There's a
Yeah.
credibility that comes with PR and articles.
Mhm.
An ad, when we see an ad, we know to discount most of what we see and
Right.
take it with a grain of salt. But when we read an article by a publication that we like our local newspaper, and they've featured or spotlighted a business, we'll often say, oh, I feel kind of cool about that. I'd like to do business with them. And
Mhm.
so when a visitor comes from an article, they often will not do price shopping. They
Yeah.
will just buy, and they
Mhm.
won't open another window and say, can I get this cheaper on Amazon? They want to
Okay.
deal with that business.
Yeah.
And, my customers find that the clients that they get from earned media articles and things like that are generally the highest converting and the most profitable. Those
Okay.
customers will turn into lifelong customers at a
Mhm.
higher price point because they aren't really price shopping. They're
Sure.
they're 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 shopping with that goodwill that was created through that article.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good to know. And thank you for sharing those examples of those companies that you dealt with and those really kind of case studies, I guess, if you will. So really good to hear. One of the things that you know, I wanted to, actually highlight when you talked about, getting these things out there, communicating with these, getting the press release out there. It's really a lot of ancillary benefits to doing it. I think a lot of times businesses are focused on just you're doing a press release to try to get some direct sales, people finding about their brand, going to their website, purchasing, finding about their business, contacting them, purchasing, getting leads or direct sales. That's usually, the big focus. But like you said, there's so many other ancillary benefits. Number one, if it's a nationally recognized publication, that becomes an awesome, testimonial, if you will, that you were featured there. And like you said, in the example of, those businesses, the carpet cleaning business and the other businesses where and the business that was on USA Today, they can use that, and all that they do in a lot of their messaging, not only on their website, but just, wherever they want to put messaging, they're, a USA Today, nationally recognized book or author, and that really goes a long way. And I think a lot of businesses may not think about that. So good to hear. As we get ready to wrap things up, I wanted to kind of double back on what you mentioned. A lot of things that you should do, some great strategies of things that you should do with the press releases. You gave us some great ideas as far as content, the creativity that you're coming up with, depending on the niche that you're in. You mentioned, let's say you're in the skincare base, skincare niche. You can maybe come up with, where are your products sourced from, or we're now sourced from totally sustainable materials, that type of thing. Those make great announcements because it can help you form a connection with people, especially these days, that are really mindful of what a brand is doing behind the scenes. So that's great. But on the other side of the coin, I wanted to kind of circle back to see what are some things that you should not put out there. What are like some definite don'ts? You mentioned that the employee hires really not something that really may give you a lot of buzz or traction. What are some other things that a brand does not want to put out there via press release?
I think attaching yourself to controversy
Okay.
can be difficult.
Mhm.
In the past, we had Black Lives Matters.
Yeah.
Ben and Jerry jumped into that, completely, because that's what their
Right.
brand is about.
Right.
And, they did a big PR campaign, even renamed an ice cream and gave
Mhm.
donations based off of that. And sometimes that can come across as disingenuous.
I see.
With Ben and Jerry, it didn't.
Yeah.
But there
Mhm.
was other companies that tried to,
Mhm.
attach and
Mhm.
say we made a donation to BLM and
Right,
stuff like
right.
that. And you run the risk of alienating people.
Yeah.
They're it's a polarizing thing, and some people feel like giving a donation or an amount of money is probably the least thing you can do to an organization if you want to support it. Rename a product. Give all the revenue from that. I mean, when Ben and Jerry's does something, they go all in. And you can take a lesson from them, but you want to be careful how you interact with certain things like that, because, it can come across as flippant, or, this month, 10% of sales goes to a charity or something like that. Those things don't work very well. And, if you're doing something very meaningful or very engaged with a charity, it could work well, but a lot of times, it doesn't, and it doesn't move the meter very much. So, I always say, put the head on of you're the journalist, and what are my readers going to be interested in? I know what you want. You want media coverage. You want to reach my readers, but what would my readers be interested in? And does this announcement rise to the level that they would find it really captivating or really interesting? And that being said, there are ways to sort of manufacture newsworthiness. You can do a survey or study. Journalists love data. So if you have enough customers or leads that you could do a survey of them, and if you don't, an easy thing to do is pick a small trade association. Small trade associations, a lot of people don't even realize they're there, but everyone knows the major one. But there's a lot of minor ones that are out there as well, and they're just hungry for attention. So if you go to them and say, hey, could you send this survey to your members, and I'll co-brand you in a press release, they're like, yes, and that's a way to get several hundred people to fill out a survey or study. And that being said, when you do a survey or study, throw a couple of oddball questions in there, because those are the things that get picked up. I've seen a lot of articles where it's like, you won't believe 27% of the insurance industry does this, and things like that, that you wouldn't know if you didn't really put your creative hat on and say, I've got the obvious questions here to get answered, but what are 2 or 3 strange ones? And sometimes they can just be open-ended questions, like I saw with a auto repair place, what's the strangest thing you found in someone's car? And and they just included in the survey results 10 of the strangest things found in someone's car. It wasn't statistically relevant because they were just individual experiences, but a boa constrictor, other strange little things, grandpa in an urn, those type of things. And those are the things that people really love to read. And that's going to really interest the readers. So there are a lot of different strategies that you could use. I recently did a video training masterclass of just PR strategies that sort of walked through several of these. And it's an hour long. I'm having a very difficult time getting my own customers to read it because or listen to the video, but I'm really urging them to do so, because I'm tired of getting these releases where it's like a new hire, and I know it's not doing anything for the company, and if they were fishing with a much better bait, they would get some media pickups. And that's the one thing I'm trying to solve there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's kind of why I asked. I wanted to see, what are the things you want to stay away from? And the controversy aspect of it definitely is timely. Like you said, when we had the whole, the BLM kind of movement uprise last year after the George Floyd killing, so many companies just jumped on it. And I was a few of those companies, I took a step back and said, wait a minute.
In the PR world, we call that newsjacking, where someone's trying to attach themselves to something that's very topical at the moment.
Exactly.
It doesn't work very well. If you're going to do it, you really want to be first, or number 2, really build on the conversation in a different way. And I feel like Ben and Jerry's did. They built on something in a different way, but all people who just made donations and affirmed that they believe in this, nothing much happened with that.
Exactly.
They don't expect it will.
Right. They were just kind of jumping on the bandwagon. That's kind of what I figured.
Right. Because no one gets fired from just, going with the flow.
Exactly.
That being said, you don't really get elevated or rise to the top if you're just, going with the flow.
Very true. Very true. Well said indeed. Well, I think that's a great way to kind of close things out, Mickie. And I've definitely learned a lot today on the podcast, and our listeners have as well. I've taken a lot of mental notes because the PR strategy is something that our business here at OSI Affiliate Software, we early on in our business career, we dabbled in it. We did a few things, but we didn't have a consistent strategy. So I've taken some mental notes, and I think there's some definitely things we can do here with the press release marketing for sure. And so I may have to hit you up sooner than later on that. But it's been great having you. But what I always like to do to close things out, just to kind of switch gears so that our listeners and viewers can get to know you just a little bit better. If you don't mind sharing one closing fun fact that you think our audience would be interested to know about you.
Well, I would probably say that I am a poet, which I'd mentioned in the creative writing thing, and right. I still write. And I think last year I got picked up in about 40 some trade public. Well, I guess you could call poetry trade publications, small presses, and so I'm still actively doing it and still writing poetry in addition to doing press releases and marketing and stuff like that. I think that would. It's strange, but I find a balance now. For a long time when I was growing my business, I stopped writing poetry. And then when I started back again, I feel like I'm in a good balance right now and everything's good with the world.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, that's good to hear. And I'm sure the creative aspect of poetry writing, I'm sure helps you on the press release side, because you do have to have a creative spin. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
The strategy component of it, I think, is where my creative juices just get flowing, and I'm able to think. And I also have the benefit of working with about 1,200 small businesses each month doing a press release. So I'm seeing what's working and what's not working, and that allows me to put together strategies that I find are working for people.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's some good stuff. Well, thank you for sharing that, Mickie. I definitely appreciate that. And lastly, before we let you go, if any of our listeners want to reach out to you and pick your brain any more about press release marketing or anything, under that kind of topic, what would be the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Just go to eReleases.com and click on contact. You can also go to eReleases.com/plan, PLAN, and that's that masterclass, that video training that I mentioned before. That's all about strategy, and it's completely free. And maybe unlike my customers, you'll actually watch it and learn and be able to do a PR campaign yourself and have it really strategically done well and newsworthy. Because if you are out there fishing with better bait, you will get media pickup. And that's what people don't seem to understand with press releases. And so it's a great opportunity for a small business that's lean, smart on its feet to get a lot of exposure that, greatly surpasses what you could get by, through paid advertising. Gotcha.
Good stuff. And really encourage everyone to check out that free resource, that free video, and to definitely contact you, if they want some assistance with their whole press release strategy. On their end. So at eReleases.com. That's a great domain name, by the way. I'm sure you get a lot of traction from that.
Yeah, 23 years ago was a lot easier to get a good domain name.
Yeah, it sure was. I definitely was back then. Well, great. Well, thanks again, Mickie, for sharing that. Thank you for joining us today on the E-Commerce Marketing Podcast.
It was great being here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to the E-Commerce Marketing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode of the E-Commerce Marketing Podcast, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know.